Hello, welcome back to the new Antioch Report. On the 8th of August, I went to the second day in the Trenches tournament of the year. Last time I was at Dark's Sphere in Shepherd's Bush, and this one was done at Entoyment in Phill. Like with the previous event, it's an escalation style tournament. However, with only having 3 games, we started off at 500 ducats and worked our way up to 700 ducats for the 3rd game. As I have done before, I wanted to push, or more accurately, punish myself by painting an entirely new warband, one that I finished just before, so no time to practice with, which wouldn't come back to bite me at all. No, not at all, no. Last time out, it was the Black Grail. The painting videos for those are almost all out at the time of recording. When they're finished, you will be seeing the videos on the Trench Pilgrims that I've been working on for this event. I decided to go with the Cavalcade of the 10th Plague for the sub-faction, rather than the Vanilla Pilgrims, because I really like the sacrificial lamb mechanic and the lore behind it, and the much more Old Church, Old Testament feel they have to them. The Day of His Wrath ability on the War Prophet being a prime example of this. With the models finished at literally the 11th hour the night before, and I mean by 22 midnight the night before, and arriving nice and early, it was time to start the event. So, let's get into it. Round 1 was Claim No Man's Land. Played on a 4-foot by 4-foot board, the deployment zones are 6 inches on opposing sides of the board, and there are 5 objectives. 1 central, and 4 placed 6 inches from the board edge, and 6 inches from each player's deployment zone. There's a 4-turn limit, played over 90 minutes, and players score 2 victory points per objective they control at the end of each game turn, as well as 1 victory point for each glorious deed they achieve. There's a model cap of 8 models, but no restrictions other than which your chosen warband dictates. The game ends immediately if a player has no models on the board. If not, whoever has the highest score at the end of game turn 4, or whatever turn you're on at the end of the allotted time, is the winner. The glorious deeds for this scenario are Sniper, Lord of War, Bloodletting, Hold Your Ground, and Resistant Bite. For this scenario, only having 500 ducats, I knew I couldn't go all out, but I could have a decently mobile force that was good at both shooting and melee for taking and holding objectives. I went with the Cavalcade of the 10th Plague for my pilgrims, because there's some very interesting lore and rules. For starters, they can all take a sacrificial lamb. In the lore, the lamb is sacrificed and the blood used to anoint themselves to ward off the wrath of Yahweh while fighting in his name. In the game, the lamb allows you to ignore the first blood bunker that would be suffered by a model each game. The fact that even the Anchorite Shrine can take this, and all for 5 ducats, is nuts. First up is the leader, and for the Trench Pilgrims, that is the War Prophet. Starting out at 80 ducats, she is kitted out with a punt gun, Misericordia, standard armour, and a sacrificial lamb. She gets the standard memento mori and loudspeakers rules, but instead of having laying on hands, in a Cavalcade of the 10th Plague warband, the War Prophet gets Day of His Wrath, which on a risky success roll targets an enemy within 3 inches and makes an injury roll on a critical success, does so with +1 injury dice and ignore armour, basically creating a mini holy shot. After the War Prophet is onto the second elite with a Castigator. I wanted to be a little bit more versatile, so gave him the Zealot Strength. This gives him the strong and negate heavy keywords, but also increasing his base size from 25mm to 32mm. He was fitted out with a flamethrower, flail, and standard armour. Also uniquely for the 10th Plague, he gains a tough keyword through the Blood of the Lamb ability. Making up the bulk of the warband are 5 Trench Pilgrims, who are all fitted out with semi-automatic rifles, bayonets, and sacrificial lambs. My opponent for this first round was Garrett, aka the Jiganator, and his Heretic Legion. I faced Garrett in the final round of the previous A Day in the Trenches tournament in the Sacred Object scenario, and I was hopeful for some revenge. He was running a Heretic Priest with a sacrificial blade and standard armour, Death Commander with Tartarus Claws, 3 Heretic Troopers with bolt action rifles and axes, and finally a War Wolf Assault Beast. After we deployed forces, we were a little behind some people, so just went straight into it, and that's when the game became extremely apparent. I sent one of my pilgrims after the Warwolf to try and slow it down, firing his rifle, failing to hit, and failing to dash away afterwards, but this was then when the wolf turned round and mauled it to death, giving both Garrett and I a prize medal. Fastest kill for him, and fastest death for me. Thanks again, mate, for that one. The dice kept betraying me as the time went on, with my War Prophet also missing her punt gun shot and failing to dash. Castigator suffering a similar fate, with a failed dash meaning he didn't have the range to hit with his flamethrower. With Garrett capturing the 2 objectives on his side of the board and the centre compared to my just 2 on my side of the board, the turn ended 4-6 in his favour. The Castigator finally got in range to use the flamethrower, burning through the war walls tough as it prepared to charge. In doing so, the Mighty Mouth failed to find purchase on the Castigator. 2 Pilgrims moved up, dashed, and shot, putting blood markers on 2 Heretic Troopers. The War Prophet levelled the punt gun, but on +3 dice, failed to hit the Priest yet again. With 2 more Pilgrims dying, and the objectives not changing hands, the turn finished 8-12 in Garrett's favour. The writing started to appear on the wall for me here. I even changed the dice to see if that would help, desperate times calling for desperate measures. But with the Commando charging, killing a Pilgrim holding an objective, it was not looking good. The Castigator was puppet mastered before getting charged by the Wolf, finally falling to a critical bite. Sadly, following this, my War Prophet was downed, we've not been able to reclaim the lost objective. It was now 8-20 in Garrett's favour, now controlling 4 objectives to my none. However, at least a point of glory was secured for passing a morale check. Turn 4, the battle was well and truly done. The War Prophet was able to get back up and charge the Heretic Trooper, but the Misericordia failed to find any purchase, placing only a blood marker. And with the remaining Pilgrim falling to the War Wolf, the final score was 8-28 in Garrett's favour. 3rd time's a charm, I hope, at the next event. Round 2 was Relic Hunt. Played on a 4x4 board, there are 6 objectives at the start of the game. At the end of turn 1, objectives 1 and 2 are removed. At the end of turn 2, objectives 3 and 4 are removed, leaving you with just the 2 centre objectives for turns 3 and 4. To claim an objective compared to the previous scenario, you have to make a success roll, where on a success or a critical success, it is claimed. Once claimed, the objective stays claimed for the remainder of the turn, even if the claiming model is downed or out. For turns 1 to 3, the objectives are worth 1 victory point each, and in the final turn, they are worth 2. For deployment, both warbands may deploy a maximum of 6 models, with none being on 40mm or large base. At the start of each game turn, the players roll off, and the winner rolls a d3 to see how many of the remaining reinforcements come onto the battlefield. This game is to the death, meaning neither side takes morale checks during this game, and neither player can choose to flee with their warband. The glorious deeds for this scenario were Sniper, Blood Sacrifice, Resistant Bite, Relic Hunter, and Protect the Relic. For round 2, there's a 600 ducat and 9 model limit in place, so it starts off with the same War Prophet build: Punt Gun, Standard Armour, Misericordia, and Sacrificial Lamb. I decided to take 2 Stigmatic Nuns in this scenario, mainly because of their 8-inch movement, and the agile agility giving them +1 dice to all dash tests. They're 50 ducats base, and both have an automatic pistol, flail, standard armour, trench shields, and one of them I gave a Warcross to. For the bulk of the list, I took 4 Pilgrims with semi-automatic rifles, flails, and sacrificial lambs. And to finally round out the list, I took 2 ecclesiastical prisoners. At 20 ducats apiece, they are cheap and remain there to capture objectives with their own +1 to dash, but I chose not to take the martyrdom devices that would turn them into bombs. Partly because they're 35 ducats apiece, and partly because, again, I needed just bodies for this scenario more than I needed the bomb, but they are really cool and something I will definitely utilise in the future. My opponent for this round was an old familiar face from my X-Wing 1.0 days in Chris Green. With no spaceships here, only more heretics, but this time of the incorporeal kind. For his trench ghosts, Chris took a heretic priest as his leader, with a grenade launcher, sacrificial blade, combat helmet, and standard armour. He then took a second elite in the form of a death commando, with Tartarus claws, combat helmet, gas grenades, and reinforced armour. 3 heretic troopers made up the bulk of the troops, with all having bolt-action rifles with bayonet, and one of them giving the heretic legionnaire upgrade. Finally, an anointed heavy infantry rounded up the list with a second grenade launcher, axe, and reinforced armour. After we had deployed, I won the roll-off and rolled a 5 on the d3, meaning that all our reinforcements would be coming onto the battlefield this turn. Both of us knew that speed would be the key to this scenario due to the disappearing relics. I immediately tried to dash with a nun to be able to claim. However, she failed, meaning a pilgrim had to pick up the slack, claiming my first objective. After the last game, I was keen to see what the punt gun could really do, and the War Prophet didn't disappoint, cleaning the tough on the heretic priest in one shot and having her in a decent position for the turns to come. Despite one of my pilgrims dying, I was able to claim a second objective, and after objectives 1 and 2 removed, the score was 2-0 in my favour. Turn 2, and I discovered how good grenade launchers were. From a barrage sent by the heretic priest, 2 pilgrims were killed and downing a nun. Ouch. One of my nuns was able to claim objective before this commando made a diving charge onto the war prophet. Unfortunately for me though, on the injury roll I only rolled a 6 on 3 dice, and he survived and ripped into her, but only for a blood marker. With Chris claiming 2 objectives with troopers, but one of my prisoners claiming a second objective, the score at the end was 4-2 in my favour. Turn 3 and just 2 objectives left on the board, and it was time to dig in, and dig in one of my nuns did, getting up from being downed, claiming one of the last 2 objectives, charged a heretic trooper, but only inflicting a blood marker, narrowly missing out on the resistant bite glory, which would have been cool, but hey, can't get everything, right? Chris was then able to claim the second objective, before sending an errant grenade careening into his own death commando, downing him with a 3rd blood marker. This mistake allowed me to bloodbath the commando, with a prisoner of all things going up and going, "You are out of here." Turn 4, we both had the same amount of models left, meaning a roll-off, and if I could win and claim first, it would put me in a good place to win the game. I won the roll-off, first bit achieved. I was able to get into position to claim, second bit achieved, but the wheels came off the plan there. I failed, and Chris capitalised, claiming the objective I was trying to claim before claiming the second. And despite a valiant effort from the Pilgrims, victory slipped from my grasp, and a final score of 5-7 in Chris's favour left me 0-2 on the day with 1 more to play. This game was fantastic, I have to say. We were both in it right into the end. In going to that final turn, I knew that I could win. I knew I was in a strong position, but Chris just pulled it out of the bag. A fantastic game. Round 3 was the Sacred Object, Fog of War deployment, and once again reinforcements. This time it was even split down the middle, rounded up so you could choose what you wanted to go down. When you bring in reinforcements for this scenario though, they don't automatically come down on your deployment zone. Instead you roll on the Fog of War chart to see where they will come on. The board is divided into north, south, east and west, and the list, which I've now put on the screen, is very cool. So you roll on d6 to see where your model will come on. That means it could come on your side, it could come on their side, it could come on the left hand side, the right hand side, or you can choose, or more hilariously, your opponent can choose, which you'll see how that plays out in this particular game. There's only one objective in this scenario, and it's slap bang in the centre, and your task is to grab it and run off the board with it. Once the model picks up the relic, their activation ends. The carrier can only use the move action. If they hit in melee or downed, they drop the object and it scatters in a random direction. If the carrier ends its move within an inch of a friendly model, it can make a risky action to pass the object on. The game ends when the carrier has reached a board edge, or at the end of the 4th turn. Whoever has control of the object, or has had the carrier reach board edge, wins the game. Any other result is a draw. This scenario has a 700 ducat and a 10 model limit, so time to bring out the big guns, or should I say, big mace. Starting off with the same War Prophet build, punt gun, misericordia, and standard armour with a sacrificial lamb. For the troops, I started off with 3 Trench Pilgrims with semi-automatic rifles, bayonets, and sacrificial lambs. A further Pilgrim was taken with a musical instrument, but nothing else, as he was there purely to get the speed element up for this scenario. I do wish I'd given him a rifle with a bayonet, or at least something, but I needed him there purely to get things up the board, so it was a 50-50 choice of what I needed. In future I probably will give him something, but for now I was happy with it for this scenario. Continuing on with the speed, I added 2 stigmatic nuns with automatic pistols, flails and standard armour. I needed a sacrifice for the Catherine wheel on the shrine, but also extra body on the board for this scenario, as who knows will get the relic and have to carry it. To this end I took 2 ecclesiastic prisoners. Finally we get to the big boy in the Anchorite shrine. With the Catherine wheel and Bonebreaker mace, it has no ranged weapons, it is a complete combat monster. And with the sacrifice, it becomes incredibly hard to kill, because you have to get through the sacrifice first, then through the shrine's tough, before finally you're able to kill it. Being a shrine of the Cavalcade of the 10th Plague, it could take a sacrificial lamb upgrade as well to ignore that first blood marker. I didn't take it for this game, but it's mad you can make this walking tank even more durable. My opponent for this round was Josh. He was also running Heretic Legion. So, 3 games, 2 standard Heretic Legion and 1 Ghosts. Not the most varied in lists, but a good chance to see how the Pilgrims favour against the Legion. Now, Josh has asked me to remind myself and tell you guys he didn't make this list, so the results aren't fully on him. But they kind of are, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. For the list, however, he had a Heretic Priest with a flamethrower, 2 trench knives, combat helmet, gas mask, infernal brand, mountaineer kit, unholy trinket, incendiary grenades, and reinforced armour. You had a heretic trooper with heretic legionnaire and machine gun, and 5 more troopers all with trench clubs and trench shields. We started off by both trying to get to the centre, and to get a head start on the race to the board edge. Josh managed to take out one of my nuns with a well-placed machine gun shot, but in return I managed to grab the objective with a pilgrim, only to drop it after by being down by the death commando, who in return failed to pick up the objective. We both knew that getting our reinforcements onto the board would happen this turn. Unfortunately for Josh, however, 3 out of his 4 ended up in my deployment zone, right next to a nun and a couple of pilgrims who'd hold them up nicely, allowing a more uncontested route to victory. If you thought Game 1 was bad for dice, and Game 2 was unlucky, well, those two combined to make this game. But not for me. Poor Josh had a good view of the centre, where I had 2 pilgrims next to his commando, a place where I was about to pick up the relic. He threw a grenade with his heretic priest, with +2 dice, surely be able to seriously injure or kill one if not both of them. No, not even close. He picks up his dice, and when the smug "I have you now" look, rolls a 4 dice, only to see 4 ones appear. Buoyed by this, my anchorite shrine charges the death commando, hits with the Catherine wheel, and with deadly, rolls 16 on the injury chart. Even with the commander's armour taking it down to a 15, in summary, the grenade was a dud, and his commando was 6 foot under. Josh, dismayed, looked down at the board where 2 of our reinforcements had come on the same edge, charged and hit my pilgrim with a trooper. Jokingly he said he knew what would happen with his dice. I agreed and said he'd roll double 1. And wouldn't you know, Snake Eyes appeared in the box. With the turn nearly over, one of my pilgrims was able to grab the relic in preparation of legging it off the board. Turn 3, and this is where the fun continued. The first priority was just to get my pilgrim to march across the board, trying to get out. Looking at the positions, the closest edge and the path of least resistance was the eastern edge, but that meant getting past the heretic priest. I moved him up and prepared for a charge that never came, because the priest failed the charge, and also failed to down the pilgrim. In response to this outrageous attempt on a fellow pilgrim life, my war prophet leveled the punt gun and downed the priest, going through his tough in the process. Turn 4, and the writing wasn't just on the wall for Josh, but being blared out on loudspeakers, so the faithful and the fallen could hear. My pilgrim made it close to the board edge, but was unable to get off the board. This meant, however, the heretics still had a chance. Or so they thought. What preceded the pilgrim's plight for the edge of the board will go down as one of the funniest turns I've ever had playing Trench Crusade so far. First of all, a prisoner, a little 20 ducat man, rocked up to this 200 ducat leader of blasphemers and proceeded to kill him with nothing more than a -1 dice slap. Swiftly followed by all of Josh's remaining melee attacks, which is 4 of them, against my warband, missing one after the other, leaving him despondent and me victorious. At the end of the day, when the dust had settled and the dice had stopped rolling, I had gone 1 and 2 with the pilgrims, but played some fantastic games in the process. Big congrats go to Nick and his pilgrims for taking the day. Uniquely for the prize support, we had the chance to win medals for certain achievements. I got 3 in the end, 1 for travelling from a different county, 1 for a fully painted warband, and sadly the aforementioned first death of the tournament. A big shout out goes to Ant and the team for putting on this event and for their future plans. There will be 4 A Day in the Trenches tournaments per year going forward, and they hope to grow the community by hosting these events around the country. The next event will be in Nottingham on the 14th of November. I am planning on being there, so hopefully I get to see you. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please do all the usual things like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow all the socials, as it really helps the channel grow. And until next time, I'll see you in the trenches.